My name is Lauren Whitmore. I am a forensic accountant. I make a living finding what does not belong where it sits. And yet, 3 nights into my husband's hospitalization, I was the one completely blind. Caleb Whitmore lay in the hospital bed beside me, both legs wrapped in thick white casts, suspended by ropes and metal pulleys. The room smelled of antiseptic and old linen. It was close to 3 in the morning, the hour when hospitals feel less like places of healing and more like quiet holding rooms for fear. I had not slept properly in days. I sat curled in a folding chair, afraid even the smallest movement would wake him and trigger another wave of pain. Caleb moaned softly in his sleep. Sweat dotted his forehead. To anyone watching, he looked fragile, broken, dependent. I leaned forward and adjusted the blanket, whispering his name, reminding myself that this was marriage, that when one person fell, the other carried the weight. That was when the door opened. The head nurse, Rachel Moore, pushed her cart inside. She was efficient, calm, the kind of woman who had seen too much to be dramatic. She barely spoke as she checked the IV line and glanced at the monitors. Then she turned to me and asked, quietly, if I could step out to grab Celine from the nurse's station. As I passed her, something cold pressed into my palm. I froze for half a second. Rachel did not look at me. She simply raised one finger to her lips, a clear warning to stay silent. I walked into the hallway, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure it could be heard. Under the dim light near the supply room, I unfolded the paper. It was a single sentence, written fast and uneven. Check last night's security camera. He is not asleep. In that moment, everything I thought I knew about my life shifted. Before that night in the hospital, I believed my life was built on solid ground. I was 32 years old, disciplined, careful, and predictable in the best way. As a forensic accountant, I spent my days untangling financial lies for corporations and courts. I trusted facts, I trusted patterns, I trusted logic, and at home I believed I trusted my marriage. Caleb and I had been together for 8 years. He was charming in a quiet way, the kind of man who knew how to speak gently and appear dependable. He worked in construction management, always talking about long hours and unstable contracts, but I never questioned him. I handled our finances, he handled the rest. That balance felt safe. Then came the accident. One phone call shattered everything. Caleb had crashed his car on the highway. The doctors said he was lucky to be alive. His legs were badly injured, and the word wheelchair floated through the room like a threat no one wanted to say out loud. From that moment on, I stopped being Lauren the professional and became Lauren the wife. I took time off work. I slept in a chair beside his bed. I measured my days by medication schedules and visiting hours. I told myself love was proven in endurance. During those first days, someone else stepped into our lives. Megan Cole, Caleb's younger cousin, had recently moved to the city. She was bright, talkative, and always ready to help. She ran errands, brought food, handled paperwork. When I was too tired to think, she filled the gaps without complaint. I remember thinking how lucky we were to have her. I thanked her often. I trusted her completely. Looking back now, that trust feels almost embarrassing, but at the time I saw nothing wrong. I saw a family pulling together during a crisis. I saw myself doing what a good wife was supposed to do. I had no idea that while I was sacrificing sleep, work, and sanity, something else was quietly forming right beside me. And I was standing in the middle of it, completely unaware. After the 3rd night in the hospital, exhaustion began to blur my thoughts. I told myself that was the reason my mind felt unsettled. But deep down, something was quietly bothering me. Caleb complained of pain constantly, but only when I was near the bed. If a nurse entered, his groans softened. When Megan was in the room, his breathing became shallow and dramatic. Yet during the rare moments when I stepped away to make a call or get coffee, the room seemed strangely calm. Whenever I tried to check his legs or adjust the casts, Caleb stopped me. He would grip my wrist and say it was too disturbing to look at, that he did not want me to see him like that. I accepted his words without argument. I thought it was dignity. Now I know it was control. His phone changed too. Before the accident, Caleb never locked it. Now it stayed hidden under his pillow, always face down. If a message arrived, he silenced it instantly. When I asked if it was work, he said he was embarrassed by how useless he had become. Megan noticed everything. Or at least she acted like she did. She would give me sympathetic looks, remind me to rest, tell me I was doing more than enough. Sometimes I caught them exchanging glances, brief and unreadable, but I dismissed it. You see, when you love someone, you work very hard not to see what hurts. Rachel's note replayed in my mind over and over. He is not asleep. I tried to push it away. I told myself nurses were tired, that hospitals bred rumors, that my fear was creating patterns where none existed. But the problem with patterns is this: once you see the first one clearly, you cannot unsee the rest. And somewhere between the beeping machines and the quiet breathing of a man I thought I knew, doubt finally took root. I did not confront Caleb. I did not ask questions. I did not cry. Instead, I did what I had been trained to do my entire adult life. I looked for evidence. That morning, after making sure Megan was in the room and Caleb was settled, I told them I needed to stop by the office. I walked past the elevators down into the parking garage and locked myself inside my car. Only then did I allow myself to breathe. I called an old friend from college who now worked in cybersecurity. I trusted him with confidential investigations before. When I explained the situation, he paused longer than usual before answering. Some things, once you see them, you cannot unsee, he warned. I told him I understood. Less than 2 hours later, he sent me a secure link. I plugged in my headphones and stared at the screen, my hand steady in a way that surprised me. The footage was black and white, taken from the ceiling of the hospital room. I watched myself on the screen, tired and small, adjusting the blanket around Caleb before leaving the room. The door closed. The room went still. For a brief moment, I hoped the nurse was wrong. Then Caleb's eyes opened. Not slowly, not groggily, they snapped open, alert and sharp. He lifted his head, scanned the room, and pushed himself up on his elbows with ease. The movement was smooth, confident. My breath caught in my throat. He swung his casted legs slightly, rotated them, then reached under his pillow for his phone. There was no hesitation, no pain, no struggle. A few minutes later, the door opened again. Megan walked in carrying a large bag. She smiled as she closed the door behind her. Is she gone? She asked. Caleb laughed. They ate. Freed food. He drank beer. He joked about being tired of soup and pretending to be weak. Megan sat close to him, touching his leg through the cast, reminding him to keep acting helpless. Then came the part that turned my blood cold. They talked about my house. The brownstone my parents left me, the one in my name. Caleb said once it was sold, his debts would be gone. Gambling debts, loans from dangerous people. He said I was easy to convince because I always sacrificed myself first. He said he would divorce me after the money was secured. When the video ended, I removed my headphones and sat in silence. I did not scream. I did not collapse. I simply understood that the man in that hospital bed was not injured. He was performing. And I was the audience he thought would never walk away. I always believed betrayal would feel loud. I imagined screaming, shaking hands, a kind of pain that demanded release. But sitting alone in that parked car, what I felt was something far quieter and far worse. Humiliation. Not because Caleb had lied, not even because of Megan, but because I had been reduced to a role in their story. The predictable wife. The reliable sacrifice. The woman who would always choose endurance over suspicion. I replayed the footage again in my mind, Caleb laughing, Megan reminding him to act weaker. The casual way they spoke about my house, my parents' home, as if it were already gone. They did not fear me. They assumed I would bend. That realization burned more than any insult ever could. And then something inside me shifted. The part of me that used to soften situations, that searched for explanations and excuses, went very still. In its place stood the woman who reviewed financial disasters for a living and never blinked. I wiped my face, not because I was crying, but because I was done being the person they expected. I deleted nothing. I saved everything. I changed my passwords. I secured my documents. I moved quietly, carefully, like someone walking through a dark room. They finally understood. From that moment on, I stopped reacting as a wife. I started thinking like an investigator. If they believed I was easy to manipulate, I would let them keep believing it. If they needed me compliant, I would appear calm, agreeable, slow to decide. Because the truth was simple. They thought they were running a con. They had no idea the woman they were lying to made a living exposing them. The hardest part was going back into that hospital room and pretending nothing had changed. I walked in with the same tired expression, the same careful movements. I asked Caleb how he was feeling. I adjusted his pillow. I listened to his complaints without interrupting. And when Megan looked at me with concern and said I should take better care of myself, I thanked her. Caleb noticed the shift immediately. When a person believes they are losing control, they tighten their grip, but when they believe they are winning, they relax. I told him I had spoken to a real estate agent. I said selling the house might be the only way to keep us afloat if his recovery dragged on. I spoke slowly, as if the words hurt me to say. The effect was instant. Caleb became softer, more affectionate. He held my hand longer. He spoke about gratitude and fear, about not wanting to be a burden. Megan watched closely, her relief barely hidden. The pressure from his family followed quickly, conversations about sacrifice, about doing what was necessary, about how money meant nothing compared to life. I nodded. I listened. I did not argue. Behind the scenes, I met with a lawyer. I gathered financial records. I traced debt patterns, gambling transfers, unofficial lenders. Everything Caleb had buried under silence surfaced cleanly on paper. Megan grew careless. She stayed out late. She whispered too confidently. She stopped hiding her impatience when I delayed decisions. When people believe the ending is guaranteed, they stop watching their steps. Caleb began slipping too. Some days he forgot to moan. Some days he sat up too straight. Some days he looked healthier than he should have. I noticed everything. Still, I said nothing. Because timing matters. And the longer they believed the house was already theirs, the more completely they revealed who they were. I was not waiting for revenge. I was waiting for the moment when the truth would collapse the story they had built. And I knew that moment was coming very soon. The night everything collapsed came quietly. Visiting hours were almost over. The hallway outside Caleb's room was calm, filled with the soft rhythm of distant footsteps and rolling carts. His mother sat beside the bed, whispering prayers. Megan stood near the window, checking her phone too often. Caleb looked nervous. He kept asking when the house paperwork would be finished. He asked if the agent had called back. He asked the same questions twice, then 3 times. I answered gently every time, telling him everything was moving forward, that he just needed to be patient a little longer. Then the door opened. 3 men walked in without hesitation. They did not look like family. Their posture was stiff, their eyes sharp. The air in the room changed instantly. One of them looked straight at Caleb and spoke his name. Caleb's face drained of color. He began moaning loudly, grabbing the sheets, playing his role perfectly. His mother stood up in alarm, demanding to know who they were and why they were there. The man smiled coldly and said they were here about money. The room went silent. They explained the amount Caleb owed, the interest, the deadline. They said they were tired of waiting. They asked when they would be paid. Caleb turned to me, desperation spilling into his voice. He told them I was selling the house. He told them the money was coming. He told them to be patient. That was when I stepped forward. I told them calmly that there would be money, but not from my house. Every face turned toward me. I took out my phone and connected it to the screen on the wall. Without raising my voice, without shaking, I pressed play. The footage filled the room. Caleb sitting up, laughing, eating, drinking, Megan beside him. Their voices filled the silence, explaining everything they thought would never be heard. His mother screamed. Megan collapsed against the wall, her hands shaking. Caleb tried to speak, but no sound came out. The men watched without interrupting. When the video ended, the leader shook his head and laughed softly. He said he had never seen someone fake a tragedy so thoroughly. They left with a warning for Caleb. When the door closed behind them, the room felt hollow. Caleb reached for me, begging, explaining, pleading. I looked at him for a long moment and felt nothing at all. The performance was over. And everyone had finally seen the truth. When the room finally emptied, the silence felt heavier than the confrontation itself. Caleb was no longer pretending. His voice cracked as he begged me not to leave, not to abandon him now that everything was exposed. He promised explanations. He promised change. He promised anything he thought might slow my steps. I did not argue. I did not raise my voice. I simply told him that trust, once dismantled so carefully, could not be rebuilt with panic and words. I said I would not sell the house. I said I would not take responsibility for his debts. I said I would be filing for divorce. His mother cried openly, torn between anger and shame. Megan could not meet my eyes. She kept repeating that she was young, that she had been influenced, that she never meant for it to go this far. I did not respond. I gathered my bag slowly, the same way I had done every night for weeks. But this time my hands did not shake. I did not look back at the bed or the machines or the man who once occupied my future. At the door, I paused for a moment. I told Caleb that this was not punishment, it was consequence, and consequences do not require cruelty to be effective. Then I walked out of the hospital. The night air outside was cold and sharp. The city lights reflected off wet pavement as cars passed without noticing me. For the first time since the accident, I felt something close to relief. I was no longer waiting in a chair beside someone else's deception. I was walking forward on my own terms. And I did not turn around. After I left the hospital, everything moved faster than I expected. The divorce papers were filed within days. With the evidence I had gathered, there was no room for negotiation. Caleb's debts were proven to be his alone. The house remained mine, clean, untouched, exactly as my parents had intended. Caleb's world, on the other hand, began to collapse. Investigations followed. His health deteriorated quickly once the performance ended. Without an audience to manipulate, there was nothing left to sustain the lie. Megan disappeared from my life entirely. No calls, no messages, just silence. I did not look for her. For a while, I lived very quietly. I returned to work. I focused on numbers, schedules, and projects that did not ask anything from my heart. In the evenings, I cooked simple meals and sat in rooms that finally felt honest. There was loneliness, yes, but there was also peace. It was during this period that I met Daniel Brooks. He was introduced through work, calm, observant. He listened more than he spoke. He never asked invasive questions. When he noticed my boundaries, he respected them without comment. We talked about ordinary things, careers, cities, small daily frustrations. There was no pressure to explain my past, no urgency to define anything. That difference mattered. For the first time, I realized how exhausting it had been to live in a constant state of emotional defense. With Daniel, I did not feel the need to perform or prove anything. I was simply allowed to exist. And slowly, without drama or promises, I began to understand that rebuilding does not require grand gestures. Sometimes it starts with silence that feels safe. Daniel did not arrive in my life like a rescue. There were no dramatic declarations, no insistence that he could fix what had been broken. He never spoke badly about my past, and he never asked me to move faster than I was ready to go. That alone felt unfamiliar. We spent time together in small, ordinary ways: coffee after work, short walks in the evening, conversations that ended naturally instead of being pushed forward. When I hesitated, he noticed. When I needed space, he gave it without offense. One evening, while we sat across from each other at a quiet table, Daniel said something that stayed with me. He told me he believed trust was not something you demand. It is something you earn, slowly, through consistency. Those words settled somewhere deep in my chest. I realized that for years I had mistaken intensity for commitment and endurance for love. I had believed that suffering quietly was proof of loyalty, but with Daniel there was no suffering to justify, no role to play. I was not careful because I was afraid. I was careful because I valued myself. We did not rush into labels, we did not promise futures. What we built was slower and far steadier than anything I had known before. And in that slowness, I felt something I had not felt in a long time. Safety. Not the fragile safety built on silence and sacrifice, but the kind that allows you to breathe without watching every word or step. For the first time, I understood that love does not ask you to disappear. It asks you to arrive as you are. Looking back now, I understand something I could not see back then. This story was never really about revenge. It was about clarity. For a long time, I believed love meant endurance. I believed loyalty meant silence. I believed that if I just gave a little more, waited a little longer, everything would eventually make sense. But the truth is this: when respect disappears, patience does not save a relationship. It only delays the damage. Caleb did not lose me because of one mistake. He lost me because he chose deception over honesty and convenience over character. And I did not walk away to punish him. I walked away because staying would have meant abandoning myself. If you are listening to this and you recognize pieces of your own life and mine, hear this clearly. You are not weak for trusting. You are not cruel for choosing yourself. And walking away from a toxic situation is not failure, it is responsibility. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop explaining, stop sacrificing, and start protecting what matters most: your dignity, your peace, your future. If this story resonated with you, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who might need to hear it, and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. This is The Art of Revenge. Not about anger, but about truth, timing, and reclaiming your life.